The Grand Hall of the Galactic Coalition headquarters buzzed with nervous energy. 42 different alien species sat around the massive circular table, their differences in shape, size, and color a testament to the diversity of intelligent life in the galaxy. But today, they shared one thing in common: fear. "The Vorn fleet has destroyed 3 more border outposts," announced General Thax, a tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms. His upper hands manipulated the holographic display in the center of the table, showing red dots where Coalition territories had fallen. Their main battle group will reach the Kalmar system within 5 days. Voices rose in alarm. The Kalmar system was a major trade hub, home to billions of civilians. If it fell, the Vorn would gain a foothold deep in Coalition space. "We must gather all available ships to defend it," said Ambassador Rill, her feathered crest rising in agitation. "Every member world must contribute to the defense fleet." More voices joined, offering suggestions, arguing about tactics, debating the merits of evacuation versus defense. The noise grew until Admiral Dorn slammed his fist on the table. Silence fell instantly. Admiral Dorn rarely spoke at these meetings, but when he did, everyone listened. The old warrior's gray skin was crisscrossed with scars, and his single remaining eye glowed with a fierce light. He had fought in more battles than most of the others had witnessed from their command centers. "There is another option," he said, his voice like gravel. "We could ask the humans for help." The silence deepened, becoming something almost physical. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Surely you're not suggesting—" Ambassador Rill let her words trail off, unable to finish the thought. "I am," Dorn said firmly. "We ask the humans to send the Nemesis." The name hung in the air like a curse. Several of the younger officers looked confused, but the veterans, those old enough to remember the last Great War, exchanged knowing glances. "Most of you have only heard stories," Admiral Dorn continued, his eyes sweeping the room. "Some think they're just tales to frighten cadets. But I was there 10 years ago, when humanity was still new to our coalition." He touched the holographic controls, and the display changed to show a distant star system. New Eden, they called it. A small human colony world. It had little strategic value, but the Vorn attacked it without warning or provocation. The humans had only 1 warship close enough to respond. The hologram shifted again, showing a dark, angular vessel that seemed to absorb the light around it rather than reflect it. "The HSS Nemesis," Dorn said quietly. "We expected nothing." The humans were newcomers, their technology unremarkable by our standards. 1 ship against a Vorn battle fleet. We prepared to welcome the survivors after the inevitable defeat. He paused, his scared face grim with memory. There were survivors, but not the ones we expected. Commander Zax, one of the younger officers, leaned forward. "What happened?" "The Nemesis destroyed the entire Vorn fleet," Dorn replied. 17 capital ships, 35 support vessels, all gone. And when it was over, the human ships simply disappeared, returned to their space without a word. Murmurs filled the room. Ambassador Rill's feathers flattened against her head. "That's impossible," said General Thax. "No single ship cold." "I saw the battle records myself," Dorn cut him off. "What that ship did, it shouldn't have been possible. The humans have technologies they don't share, weapons they don't discuss. And tactics." He shook his head. "They fight like nothing I've ever seen. If this ship is so powerful, why haven't we heard of it since?" Commander Zax asked. Dorn's eye narrowed. "There was an incident 5 years ago. Something happened at Proxima Centauri. The details were classified. But afterward, the humans withdrew the Nemesis from active service. Some say they were ashamed of what it had done." The room erupted in debate. Some argued they should request human assistance immediately. Others warned against involving a force they couldn't control. In the end, a vote was taken. By a narrow margin, the coalition decided to send an envoy to Earth. Halfway across the galaxy, Captain Thomas Reed stood at the window of his small cabin, looking out at the Pacific Ocean. The morning sun glittered on the water, and for a moment, he could almost forget the dreams that had woken him before dawn. Dreams of fire and silence, and the cold void of space. The doorbell chimed. Reed didn't turn from the window. "Come in," he called, knowing who it would be. Admiral Wilson entered, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. She carried a data tablet and a look of determination that Reed recognized all too well. "They're reactivating the Nemesis," she said without preamble. Now Reed did turn, his weathered face expressionless. "Why?" "The Vorn are on the move again. The Coalition has formally requested our help." Reed laughed, a short, harsh sound with no humor in it. "After what happened at Proxima, I'm surprised they'd want us within 1,000 light-years of their precious worlds." "They're desperate," Wilson replied, "and the Joint Chiefs have agreed. The Nemesis launches in 48 hours. Reed turned back to the window. "Find someone else to command her." "There is no one else, Tom. You know that ship better than anyone alive. And despite what happened, despite the hearing and the forced retirement, you're still the best captain we have." Reed closed his eyes, seeing not the peaceful ocean, but the cold blackness of space, feeling not the warm sun, but the phantom vibration of the Nemesis's engines beneath his feet. "She's been refitted," Wilson continued. "New systems, new protocols." She hesitated. "Some of your old crew have already volunteered to return." "They're fools," then Reed said quietly. "Maybe, or maybe they believe in you, even after everything." Reed was silent for a long moment. Finally, he turned to face the Admiral. "What are the terms?" "Full autonomy. The Coalition gets your help, but you answer only to Earth Command. They don't get to know our capabilities, and they don't get to question your tactics." Reed nodded slowly. "And afterward, when the Vorn are dealt with, the Nemesis returns to Earth space, and you with it." Reed picked up the small model ship that sat on his desk, a perfect miniature of the Nemesis, black and sleek and terrible. He had carried it with him through 5 years of exile, a reminder of what he had done, what he might have to do again. "When do we leave?" he asked. Wilson handed him the data tablet. "Your reinstatement is already processed. Transport leaves for the orbital shipyard in 3 hours." As she turned to go, Reed spoke again. "Admiral, do they know? The Coalition, do they know what they're asking for?" Wilson paused at the door. "I don't think anyone truly knows what the Nemesis is capable of, Tom. Not even us. That's what scares them. That's what scares all of us." After she left, Reed looked down at the tablet. His new orders were clear. Take command of the HSS Nemesis. Defend Coalition space against Vorn aggression. Return when the mission is complete. Simple words for what would be anything but a simple task. He packed quickly, taking only what he needed. As he took one last look at his home of 5 years, he realized he felt nothing. No sadness at leaving, no joy at returning to the stars, only a cold certainty that the galaxy was about to remember why they had feared the name Nemesis, and why they had feared its captain even more. The orbital shipyard hung in space like a massive metal spider, its long arms cradling the dark shape that was the HSS Nemesis. As the shuttle approached, Reed pressed his hand against the viewport, his eyes fixed on the warship that had once been his home. The Nemesis was unlike any other ship in Earth's fleet, where most human vessels followed the same design principles as their alien counterparts, sleek, rounded hulls with a certain aesthetic appeal. The Nemesis rejected beauty for pure function. Its angular, asymmetric form was covered in weapon mounts and sensor arrays. The hull was coated with a material that absorbed rather than reflected light, making it appear as a ship-shaped hole in space. "She doesn't look 5 years older," Reed said quietly. The shuttle pilot nodded. "They've kept her ready, sir, like they knew someday they'd need her again." The shuttle docked with the shipyard, and Reed made his way through the familiar corridors. Personnel stepped aside as he passed, their faces showing a mix of respect and unease. His reputation had only grown during his absence, it seemed. At the main airlock to the Nemesis, a familiar figure waited. Commander Alex Morgan straightened to attention as Reed approached. 5 years had added some gray to Morgan's hair, but the sharp intelligence in his eyes hadn't changed. "Captain," Morgan said, offering a crisp salute. "Welcome back." Reed returned the salute. "XO, I didn't expect to see you here. Where else would I be?" When they said they were reactivating the Nemesis, I requested immediate transfer. Morgan's expression softened slightly. Most of the old bridge crew did the same. Wilson, Chen, Davis, they're all aboard. Reed felt something stir inside him. The first real emotion he'd experienced since receiving his new orders. After Proxima. After what happened, I'm surprised anyone would want to serve with me again. Morgan met his gaze steadily. "What happened at Proxima wasn't your fault, sir. Those of us who were there know that." Reed didn't respond to that. Instead, he gestured toward the airlock. "Let's see what they've done to my ship." The interior of the Nemesis was both familiar and strange. The basic layout remained the same, but Reed could see evidence of the refit that Admiral Wilson had mentioned. New control panels, updated systems, modifications to the weapons stations. As they walked through the ship, crew members stopped to acknowledge their captain's return. Some were veterans who had served on the Nemesis before, their eyes showing recognition and respect. Others were new, young faces that regarded Reed with barely concealed awe. "They've been telling stories about you," Morgan said, noticing Reed's reaction to the younger crew members. "About us. About what the Nemesis did at New Eden." "Stories get bigger with each telling," Reed replied. "Especially the scary ones." They reached the engine room, where Chief Engineer Marcus Wilson was bent over a console, arguing with a technician from the shipyard. Wilson was a large man with massive hands and a wild beard that defied military regulations. When he saw Reed, his face split into a broad grin. "Captain, about time you showed up." He waved dismissively at the technician. "Tell your supervisor I'll sign off on the changes when I'm good and ready, not before." As the technician left, grumbling, Wilson turned back to Reed and Morgan. "They've been trying to improve my engines for weeks. Idiots wouldn't know a phase inverter from a plasma regulator." Reed smiled slightly. "Some things never change. What have they done to my ship, Chief?" Wilson's expression turned serious. "A lot, sir. Some good, some." He glanced around and lowered his voice. "Some changes I don't agree with. Come see." He led them deeper into the engine room, to a sealed door marked with high security warnings. Wilson entered a code, and the door slid open to reveal a large chamber dominated by a device Reed didn't recognize. A complex arrangement of curved metal and pulsing energy fields. "What am I looking at, Chief?" Reed asked. "They're calling it the Prometheus Drive," Wilson replied. "It's what they've been working on for the past 3 years. The reason they kept the Nemesis in reserve instead of stripping her for parts." Morgan stepped closer to the device, his face reflected in its polished surfaces. "It's supposed to replace the Ghost Drive." Wilson nodded. "The Ghost Drive let us go invisible to sensors. This thing," he shook his head, "they say it can do a lot more, but it's experimental, dangerous." Reed studied the device, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. They wouldn't install it without a reason. "The Vorn," Morgan said. "They must be expecting one hell of a fight." Wilson grunted in agreement. "The techs won't tell me how it works. Say it's beyond my clearance." His beard bristled with indignation. "On my own damn ship." Reed placed a hand on the engineer's shoulder. "It's still your engine room, Chief. I want you to learn everything you can about this new drive. If we're going to use it, I want to know exactly what it does." As they left the engine room, Reed's data tablet chimed with a message. "The Coalition representatives are docking in 30 minutes, he told Morgan. "Have the senior staff meet me in the conference room." On the bridge of the Nemesis, Reed stood before the main view screen, watching as the last of the shipyard's maintenance arms withdrew from the hull. The ship was now free, connected to the station only by docking clamps. Around him, the bridge crew worked at their stations, their movements becoming more confident as they reacquainted themselves with the ship's systems. Morgan stood at Reed's side, reviewing the final departure checklist. "All stations report ready, Captain," he said. "Pre-launch diagnostics complete. The Coalition observers are aboard and settled in their quarters." Reed nodded. "Notify Earth Command that we're prepared for departure." As Morgan relayed the message, Reed's mind drifted back to his last day on this bridge, 5 years ago. The chaos, the alarms, the desperate gamble that had saved lives but ended his career. Would it be different this time? Or was the Nemesis destined to remain what it had always been, a weapon of last resort, too powerful, too dangerous to use except in the most desperate circumstances? The communications officer looked up from her station. "Earth Command confirms launch clearance, Captain. We are ordered to proceed to the rendezvous coordinates at best speed." Reed turned to face his crew, feeling the weight of 40 pairs of eyes upon him. They were waiting for words, for inspiration, for reassurance. He had never been good at speeches. "Most of you know what we're facing," he said simply. "The Vorn aren't just raiders or pirates. They're conquerors. They've already destroyed 3 Coalition outposts, and they won't stop there." He looked around the bridge, meeting each gaze in turn. "We've faced them before. Some of you were with me at New Eden. Others have only heard the stories. Today we all find out how much of those stories is true." He turned back to the view screen, where the vast blackness of space waited. "Release docking clamps. Take us out, helm. 1/4 power until we clear the solar system. Then prepare the jump drive." As the Nemesis pulled away from the shipyard, Reed felt the subtle vibration of the engines through the deck plates. The ship seemed to come alive around him, responding to his commands as if it had been waiting for his return. Somewhere out there, the Vorn fleet was advancing toward its next target, unaware that the Nemesis had been unleashed once more, unaware that their worst nightmare was coming for them. "Captain," Morgan said quietly, so only Reed could hear. "The crew is wondering. Will we use it? The Prometheus drive." Reed watched as the stars streaked past on the view screen. "Let's hope we don't have to. XO, for everyone's sake." But deep inside, in a place he rarely acknowledged, Reed knew better. The Nemesis hadn't been reactivated, hadn't been fitted with experimental technology, just to frighten the enemy. This time, like the last, they would be asked to do the unthinkable. And this time, like the last, they would not refuse. The Nemesis dropped out of jump space with barely a shudder, a testament to Wilson's skill with the engines. On the main screen, the Coalition fleet came into view, a collection of ships from a dozen different worlds, gathered to face the Vorn threat. 53 vessels, reported Lieutenant Davis from the sensor station, mostly light cruisers and support ships, only 6 heavy capital ships. Reed studied the fleet. Even from a distance, he could see the differences in design and technology, a reflection of the various species that made up the Coalition. Some were streamlined and elegant, built more for speed than combat. Others bristled with weapons, but lacked the advanced shielding that would keep them alive in a prolonged engagement. "Not much of a defense force," Morgan observed quietly. Reed nodded. "They've been at peace too long. Forgotten what real war looks like." "Incoming transmission from the Coalition flagship, Captain," called the communications officer. "On screen," Reed ordered. The view screen shifted to show the face of Admiral Levix, the Coalition fleet commander. Levix was from a reptilian species with scaled skin and vertical pupils, giving him a perpetually suspicious look. "Captain Reed," he said, his translator rendering his words with only a slight delay. "Your arrival is timely. We had begun to fear Earth had reconsidered its commitment." "The Nemesis was in reserve," Reed replied. "It took time to make her ready." Levix's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes, I've heard this ship has been inactive since the Proxima incident. I trust that will not affect your performance in the coming battle." Morgan stiffened beside Reed, but the captain's expression remained neutral. "The Nemesis is fully operational, Admiral. My crew is ready. We await your orders." "Excellent," Levick said, though his tone suggested he was far from convinced. "We're holding a strategy session in 2 hours. I expect you and your senior officers to attend." The transmission ended, and Morgan let out a breath. "Friendly sort, isn't he?" "He's scared," Reed said. "They all are, not just of the Vorn." Morgan glanced around the bridge. "Of us, you mean?" Reed's eyes remained on the screen, where the Coalition fleet hung against the backdrop of stars. "Of what we might do. Of what we've done before." The Coalition flagship's conference room was crowded with officers from a dozen different species. When Reed entered with Morgan and Lieutenant Davis, a hush fell over the room. Eyes turned to observe the humans, their expressions ranging from curiosity to poorly concealed fear. Admiral Levick gestured to empty seats at the table. "Captain Reed, please join us. We were just discussing defensive formations." Reed sat, noting how the officers on either side shifted subtly away. "What's the latest intelligence on the Vorn fleet, Admiral?" Levick touched a control, and a holographic display appeared above the table. It showed the predicted path of the Vorn fleet toward the Kalmar system. "Our scouts report 20 capital ships, supported by approximately 40 smaller vessels." Levick's scaled face was grim. "They will reach the outer defense perimeter within 18 hours. One of the Coalition captains, a tall, thin alien with luminous patches on his skin, spoke up. "We've positioned automated defense platforms along their likely approach vector. When they engage those defenses, we can catch them in a pincer movement." Reed studied the tactical display, then shook his head. "It won't work." The room fell silent. Levick's vertical pupils narrowed to slits. "Explain." "The Vorn don't fight like you do," Reed said. He stood and moved to the display, adjusting the holographic representation of the enemy fleet. "They won't commit their entire force to a single attack vector. They'll probe for weaknesses, sacrifice their forward elements to identify your positions, then strike with overwhelming force at the point where you're most vulnerable." "You seem quite familiar with Vorn tactics, Captain," said another Coalition officer, his tone suspicious. Reed's expression didn't change. "I've fought them before, at New Eden, and at Proxima." The name hung in the air like an accusation. A murmur ran through the assembled officers. Levick leaned forward. "Perhaps you would care to share your expertise with us, Captain Reed. What would you suggest?" Reed looked around the room, at the alien faces both hostile and uncertain. They didn't trust him, didn't trust the Nemesis, but they needed them both. "The Vorn respect strength," he said finally. "They're pragmatic. They don't fight battles they don't think they can win." He pointed to different areas on the tactical display. "We need to convince them that attacking Kalmar will cost them more than they can afford to lose." "And how do we do that?" asked the luminous-skinned captain. Reed's face was grim. "We hit them first. Hard. Show them what they're facing before they commit their main force. A preemptive strike." Levick's voice was shocked. "With what? Our fleet is barely half the size of theirs." "Not the entire fleet," Reed said. "Just one ship. The Nemesis." The room erupted in objections. It was suicide, they said. Reckless. Impossible. Reed waited for the noise to die down before he spoke again. "The Nemesis has capabilities your ships don't," he said quietly. "We can bypass their forward screens, strike their command vessels, and be gone before they realize what's happening." "The Ghost Drive," said one of the older officers, his voice hushed. "The stories are true, then." Reed didn't confirm or deny. "What matters is that we can hurt them, make them reconsider their attack." Admiral Levick studied Reed for a long moment. "And if this fails, if your ship is destroyed, we lose our strongest asset before the main battle even begins." "It won't fail," Reed said with a certainty that silenced the room. "But if you prefer, we can wait here, let them come to us, and hope your defense plan works better than I think it will." Levick's scaled face was unreadable, but after a moment, he gave a curt nod. "Very well, Captain Reed. You have 12 hours to prepare your preemptive strike. But know this, if you fail, the defense of Kalmar falls to the rest of us, and we will remember who left us to face that burden alone." Back aboard the Nemesis, Reed stood in his ready room, looking at the tactical data they'd received from the Coalition. Morgan waited silently as the captain studied the enemy fleet's composition. "They don't believe we can do it," Morgan said finally. "Would you, in their position?" Reed asked. "One ship against 20. Morgan's lips quirked in a half smile. "I've seen what this ship can do, sir." Reed nodded slowly. "So have the Vorn. That's what I'm counting on." He pointed to a specific vessel in the enemy formation. "This one. The command ship. That's our target." Morgan leaned closer to look. "Heavy defenses. Their best shields. Also their weakest point," Reed said. "If we take out their command structure, the rest of the fleet will hesitate. It might give us the opening we need." The intercom chimed, and Wilson's voice came through. "Captain, we've finished the modifications to the targeting systems. But there's something you should know about the Prometheus drive." Reed exchanged a glance with Morgan. "I'll be right down, Chief." As they headed for the engine room, Morgan asked the question that had been on his mind since the meeting. "Sir, are you sure about this? If it doesn't work?" "It has to work, XO," Reed interrupted. "Because if it doesn't, we're not just losing a ship or a system." His eyes were distant, remembering. "I've seen what the Vorn do to worlds they conquer. What they did at Proxima before we stopped them." Morgan nodded slowly. "Then we'd better make sure it works, sir." The two officers walked in silence through the corridors of the Nemesis, the weight of their mission settling around them like a shroud. In just a few hours, they would either strike a blow that would be remembered throughout the galaxy, or become another footnote in the growing legend of the most feared warship in space. A legend that, this time, might end in fire and silence. In the dark bridge of the Vorn command ship, War Master Krall studied the tactical display with cold, calculating eyes. His gray skin was marked with the ceremonial scars of his many victories, each one representing a conquered world. "Our scouts report the Coalition fleet has gathered at Kalmar," said his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vex. 53 vessels, mostly light craft, only 6 capital ships. Krall made a dismissive gesture with one of his 4 arms. "No match for our fleet. Their defenses will fall within hours." "There is one more thing, War Master," Vex said, hesitation clear in his normally confident voice. "A human vessel joined their fleet 12 hours ago." Krell's head snapped up, his yellow eyes narrowing. Designation: the HSS Nemesis. The name sent a ripple of tension through the bridge crew. Many of the younger officers had never seen combat against humans, but all knew the stories. The Nemesis was a shadow in Vorn military history, a dark legend used to frighten new recruits. Krall was silent for a long moment. Unlike many of his officers, he had faced the human ship before. At New Eden, where 17 Vorn vessels had been destroyed in less than an hour, and though he had not been present at Proxima, he had reviewed the classified battle reports. "The Nemesis was decommissioned," he said finally. "After Proxima, the humans were too afraid to use it again." "Apparently not, War Master," Vex replied. "Our intelligence confirms it is the same vessel." And he hesitated again. "The same captain." "Reed." Krall almost hissed the name. "So they've brought their demon back from exile." Another officer stepped forward. "War Master, this single ship cannot change the outcome of the battle. Our new adaptive shields were specifically designed to counter human weapons technology, and we outnumber them significantly." Krall turned his yellow eyes on the officer. "You weren't at New Eden, Commander Lore. You didn't see what that ship can do." He touched a control, bringing up a new tactical display. "Adjust our approach. Maximum sensor sweep. I want to know where the Nemesis is at all times." "You believe they will attack?" Vex asked. "I know Reed," Krall replied. He doesn't wait for the enemy to come to him. He strikes first. The War Master's mouth stretched in what might have been a smile on a human face, but on his alien features looked more like a grimace. Let him come. This time, we are ready. The Nemesis drifted silently through the darkness of space, all systems except life support running at minimal power. From the outside, the ship was nearly invisible against the black backdrop of space, its light-absorbing hull hiding it from visual detection. On the bridge, Reed sat in the command chair, watching the main screen where the distant lights of the Vorn fleet grew steadily larger. The bridge was lit only by the glow of essential displays, casting eerie shadows across the faces of the crew. Ghost drive functioning at 98% efficiency, Davis reported from the sensor station. We're effectively invisible to standard scans. What about their advanced sensors? Morgan asked. The briefing said they've improved their detection systems since New Eden. Reed's eyes never left the screen. That's why we're not using the jump drive to get closer. A jump signature would alert them, no matter how good our stealth systems are. The ship continued its silent approach, the tension on the bridge growing with each passing minute. They were deep in enemy territory now, with no backup and no escape route except through the heart of the Vorn fleet. 2 minutes to optimal firing range, Weapons Officer Lieutenant Park announced. Reed tapped the comm control on his chair. Engine room. Status of the Prometheus drive. Wilson's voice came back, tense but confident. Ready, Captain. But I have to repeat my concerns. The simulations show a 30% chance of drive overload if we activate it at full power. Noted, Chief, Reed replied. Be ready on my mark. As they drew closer to the Vorn fleet, Reed could make out individual ships on the screen. In the center of the formation was Krell's command vessel, a massive warship nearly twice the size of the Nemesis. Targeting solution locked, Park reported. Primary weapons charged and ready. Reed straightened in his chair. This was the moment of truth. Either their plan would work, crippling the Vorn command structure and forcing them to reconsider their attack on Kalmar, or he pushed that thought aside. Failure wasn't an option. Not again. Not after Proxima. All hands, battle stations, he ordered. Helm, bring us in on attack vector 9-3. Weapons, target their command ship's propulsion systems and bridge section. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, each knowing their role in the coming fight. Sir, Morgan said quietly, standing next to Reed's chair. I've been thinking about the Proxima incident. Reed glanced up at his XO, surprised. This isn't the time, Commander. With respect, sir, it's exactly the time. Morgan's eyes were steady. What happened there wasn't your fault. You made the only choice you could. Reed's jaw tightened. The memories of Proxima, the desperate battle, the civilian ships caught in the crossfire, the choice he'd been forced to make, flashed through his mind. 30 seconds to firing range, Park announced. We all followed your orders that day, Morgan continued, because they were the right orders, and we'll follow them today for the same reason. Before Reed could respond, Davis called out from the sensor station. Captain, they've spotted us. On the main screen, the Vorn fleet was changing formation, ships accelerating to intercept the Nemesis. How? Reed demanded. The Ghost Drive. They're using some kind of new scanning technology, Davis reported, hands flying over his console. It's cutting right through our stealth field. Reed's mind raced. The element of surprise was gone. They were outnumbered, deep in enemy space, with no hope of backup. Exactly the kind of situation the Nemesis had been built for. New plan, he said, his voice calm despite the danger. Helm, take us straight at their command ship, maximum thrust. Weapons, full spread of Reaper missiles, target their forward screen generators. Sir, Park sounded uncertain. At that range, the blast will affect us too. I'm counting on it, Reed replied. Chief Wilson, stand by with the Prometheus drive. When I give the word, I want full power, no safety limiters. Morgan's eyebrows rose. Captain, That's not. The only way out is through. XO, Reed cut him off. We hit them hard enough that they'll think twice before following. On the screen, the Vorn ships were moving into attack formation, weapons powering up. The first shots, long-range energy beams, flashed past the Nemesis, near misses as the enemy gunners struggled to get a lock on the fast-moving human ship. 15 seconds to contact, the helm officer reported, her voice steady despite the stress. Reed opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, brace for impact. This is going to get rough. The Nemesis streaked toward the heart of the Vorn fleet, its engines glowing white-hot with the strain. Enemy fire intensified, some shots now finding their mark, splashing against the ship's shields in bursts of energy. Shields at 80% and falling, Davis called out. Almost there, Reed said, watching as the massive form of Krell's command ship filled the screen. Weapons, fire all Reapers on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Fire. The Nemesis shuddered as a dozen Reaper missiles, the most advanced weapons in Earth's arsenal, launched toward the Vorn command ship. Unlike conventional weapons, the Reapers briefly shifted into another dimension before reappearing inside enemy shields, making them nearly impossible to stop. Direct hits. Park shouted as explosions bloomed across the Vorn vessel's hull. Their forward shields are down. Now, Chief, Reed ordered. Activate the Prometheus drive. Deep in the ship's heart, Wilson hesitated for just a moment, then pushed the activation sequence. The experimental drive hummed to life, energy building to levels never tested outside a laboratory. On the bridge, screens flickered as power was diverted to the new system. The deck plates vibrated beneath the crew's feet, and a high-pitched whine filled the air. "What's happening?" Morgan asked, gripping the back of Reed's chair to stay upright. Reed's eyes were fixed on the Vorn command ship, now less than 1,000 kilometers away. "Watch," he said quietly. The Prometheus drive reached full power, and for a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a wave of energy burst from the Nemesis, spreading outward in all directions. Where it touched Vorn ships, their systems flickered and died, weapons powering down, engines stalling. The mighty command ship, already damaged by the Reaper missiles, drifted helplessly as the energy wave passed through it. Across the Vorn fleet, vessel after vessel went dark. On the Nemesis, warning alarms sounded as the Prometheus drive strained beyond its designed limits. "Drive overload imminent." Wilson's voice came over the comm, nearly drowned out by the sound of failing equipment. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before it blows." Reed turned to Morgan. "Get us out of here. Maximum thrust, any direction away from the Vorn fleet." As the Nemesis limped away from the disabled enemy ships, Reed allowed himself a small smile. They hadn't destroyed the Vorn fleet, but they'd done something perhaps more valuable. They'd shown them what one human ship could do. They'd given them something to fear. And fear, sometimes, was the most powerful weapon of all. Alarms blared throughout the Nemesis as the ship raced away from the disabled Vorn fleet. The deck plates vibrated with increasing intensity, and the lights flickered as power fluctuated across all systems. "Engine room," Reed called over the comm. "Status of the Prometheus drive." Wilson's voice came back, nearly drowned out by the sound of failing equipment. "Critical overload, Captain. The containment field is failing. We need to shut it down now, or we'll lose the whole ship." Reed turned to Morgan. "Options." The XO's face was grim. "At this point, not many. The drive is connected to all our primary systems. Shutting it down hard could leave us dead in space. Better than being atomized," Reed muttered. He made his decision. "Wilson, emergency shutdown. All hands, prepare for power loss." Throughout the ship, crew members braced themselves. In the engine room, Wilson and his team worked frantically, rerouting power and disengaging safety protocols designed to prevent exactly what they were now attempting. Cutting main power to the drive in 3, 2, 1. Wilson's voice counted down. "Now." The Nemesis shuddered violently as the Prometheus drive shut down. For a terrifying moment, all lights and systems went dark. The ship drifted silently, wounded but intact. On the bridge, emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow over the crew. Reed gripped the arms of his command chair, counting the seconds in his head. 3, 4, 5. With a series of clicks and hums, the backup systems engage. Basic life support, minimal propulsion, emergency communications, just enough to keep them alive and moving. Damage report, Reed ordered, his voice steady despite the situation. Davis ran a quick diagnostic on his half-functioning console. Main power grid is fried. Weapons systems offline. Shields at 12%. The ghost drive is completely dead. He looked up, his expression mixed with worry and wonder. But sir, the Prometheus drive, it worked. The Vorn fleet is completely disabled. Reed stood, moving to the main view screen which now showed only static. Communications. Can we contact the Coalition? The communications officer shook her head. Long-range comms are down, sir. We can try to boost the emergency beacon, but I don't know if it will reach Kalmar. Do it, Reed ordered. And get me any visual on the Vorn fleet, even if you have to look out a window with binoculars. As the crew worked to restore basic functionality, Morgan moved to Reed's side. What do you think Krell will do now? He asked quietly. Reed's face was thoughtful. If I know Vorn thinking, and I've spent years studying it, he'll be reconsidering the entire campaign. The Prometheus wave didn't just disable his ships. It showed him a weapon he's never seen before, can't defend against, and doesn't understand. Fear, Morgan said with dawning comprehension. We've given him something to fear. Reed nodded. The most powerful weapon isn't the one that destroys your enemy. It's the one that convinces them not to fight in the first place. The communications officer called from her station. Captain, we've managed to get short-range comms back online. And, sir, there's a message coming from the Vorn command ship. Reed and Morgan exchanged surprised glances. Put it through, Reed ordered. The static on the main screen cleared slightly, revealing the scared face of War Master Krell. His yellow eyes glowed with a mixture of rage and, most importantly, caution. Captain Reed, the Vorn commander's translated voice came through with occasional breaks in transmission. It seems your reputation, not exaggerated. Reed stood straighter, facing his adversary. War Master Krell, your ships will regain power within a few hours. The effect is temporary. Krell's expression shifted slightly. A mercy or a weakness? A choice, Reed replied. I could have destroyed your fleet. Instead, I've given you a chance to make a choice of your own. The Vorn was silent for a moment. And what choice would that be, human? Withdraw from Coalition space. Return to your territory. Find another solution to your resource problems that doesn't involve conquest. Krell's face twisted in what might have been a laugh. Or you will destroy us next time. Reed's expression remained calm. There doesn't need to be a next time, War Master. The Coalition is willing to negotiate trade agreements, resource-sharing plans. War benefits neither of us. The Vorn do not negotiate with inferiors, Krell said, but his tone lacked conviction. Then consider this, Reed said. The weapon we just used was a prototype, a test model. Even now, Earth is building more, installing them on other ships. How many fleets are you willing to lose before you accept that some enemies are too costly to fight? The communication link fell silent for several long seconds, and Reed wondered if they had lost the connection. Then Krell's voice returned. You are an unusual species, humans. You build weapons of incredible destruction, then hesitate to use them. The Vorn commander's yellow eyes narrowed. We will withdraw. For now. But the Vorn Empire does not forget, Captain Reed. Neither do humans, War Master, Reed replied. Remember that. The screen went blank as Krall ended the transmission. On the bridge of the Nemesis, the crew exchanged hopeful glances. "Did we just win?" Davis asked. Reed turned to look at his sensor officer. "For today, at least," he addressed the entire bridge. "Good work, all of you. Now let's see about getting this ship moving again before the Vorn change their minds." 3 days later, the damaged Nemesis limped into orbit around Kalmar. The Coalition fleet moved to escort the human vessel, their earlier distrust replaced by a newfound respect. Admiral Levix himself came aboard to meet with Reed. The Coalition commander's scaled face showed clear signs of stress, but there was no hiding his relief and gratitude. "The Vorn fleet has withdrawn from Coalition space entirely," Levix reported as they walked through the damaged corridors of the Nemesis. "Our long-range scouts confirm they're returning to their own territory." Reed nodded. "They're pragmatic. They won't waste resources on a fight they don't think they can win." Levix stopped, turning to face the human captain. "You saved Kalmar. Saved billions of lives. The Coalition Council has authorized me to offer Earth an immediate upgrade in membership status. Full voting rights, access to all technology exchanges." "Earth will be pleased," Reed said. The alien commander seemed hesitant. "There is one more thing. Many in the Coalition are curious about this new weapon you deployed, the one that disabled the Vorn fleet without destroying it. Such technology would be valuable to share." Reed's expression revealed nothing. "I'll relay your interest to Earth Command, Admiral, but some technologies aren't meant to be shared, even with allies." Levix nodded slowly. "I understand, and perhaps it is better this way. Some legends are more powerful when the details remain mysterious." He extended a scaled hand in the human gesture of respect he had learned. "The Nemesis will always be welcome in Coalition space, Captain Reed." After Levix departed, Reed made his way to the observation deck. The ship's repairs were underway, but it would be weeks before the Nemesis was fully operational again. Through the viewport he could see Kalmar below, its blue oceans and green continents untouched by war. Morgan found him there, gazing at the planet they had saved. "Orders from Earth Command, Captain," the XO reported. "Once repairs are complete, we're to return to Earth." "And then?" Reed asked. Morgan handed him the data tablet. "They're keeping the Nemesis active. No more reserve status. They want you to remain in command." Reed was silent for a long moment. "After everything that happened at Proxima, I never thought they'd trust me with this ship again." "The Nemesis needs you," Morgan said simply. "And maybe you need it too." Reed turned back to the viewport. Somewhere out there, the story of what had happened between the Nemesis and the Vorn fleet was already spreading, growing, becoming legend. "The most powerful weapon isn't the one that destroys your enemy," he repeated quietly. "It's the one that convinces them not to fight in the first place." "Is that what we are now, sir?" Morgan asked. "A weapon?" Reed considered the question. "No," he said finally. "We're something more complicated than that. We're the monster under the bed that keeps the real monsters at bay. The shadow that makes even conquerors think twice." He touched the cool glass of the viewport, looking out at the stars where countless civilizations lived in peace, unaware of how close they had come to war. "That's the weight of legend, XO," he said, "and the burden we carry." As the Nemesis orbited silently above Kalmar, its black hull absorbing the light of the system's sun, word of its deed spread throughout the galaxy. On 100 worlds, in 1,000 languages, beings told the story of the human ship that had faced a Vorn armada alone, and won. With each telling, the story grew. Some said the Nemesis could turn invisible. Others claimed it could disable entire fleets with a wave of energy. Still others whispered that its captain had stared into the eyes of the fearsome Warmaster Krall and made him retreat through words alone. Not all the stories were true, but perhaps that didn't matter. Because the most powerful legend of all was the one that ended not with destruction, but with enemies turning away, choosing peace over war, life over death. And in the vastness of space, where conflict had raged for millennia, that was perhaps the greatest victory of all.